A ritual is defined in Wikipedia as a series of actions and activities performed in a specifically chosen place. For example, a church service. Rituals are mostly associated to religion, but it can also be part of coronations, marriages and funerals, school graduations, Halloween or Christmas parties. Even things like saying good morning or shaking hands could be deemed ritualistic. In other words, a ritual is like a protocol or tradition. But what we want to look at is at the different types of rituals there are out there. Although rituals are seen as mundane activities with positive outcomes, in some cases there are dangerous ceremonies that create negative outcomes. In other words, occult crimes, as referred to by the law enforcement. However, there is a complication with this term. Instead, a more fitting term is ritual crimes, because it includes all types of transgressive ritual behaviors, unlike the term used by the law, because the word occult is actually linked to many religions and traditions that are actually not violent, like magic or astrology. So what are ritualistic crimes then? Dawn Perlmutter is a leading expert in ritualistic crimes who helps law enforcement across the USA on how to identify and investigate these types of crimes. According to her, they are characterized by crimes like vandalism, church desecration, ritual abuse, animal and human sacrifice, just to name a few. So basically, ritual crimes are crimes that are performed as a tradition or ceremony for spiritual, punishment, or medical purposes. Some key examples of ritualistic violent practices date back to the 16th century. One of the first records of human sacrifice in Aztec civilization was made by Herman Cortés in 1521, when he first-hand witnessed the event. Human sacrifices were carried out to repay their debt to the gods. This is a key example of an altruistic sort of society, as Bernardino de Sahagún argues someone in the community would willingly volunteer their service and be sacrificed. Similarly, members of the community and Maya kings would offer blood from their tongues, earlobes, and sometimes genitals to the gods. Then we have Satanism, which became a religious practice after the emergence of the Church of Satan in 1966. It is basically believing in him and his power. Many argue that if one were to rank any practices that involve ritualistic transgressive acts, this would come in first, in terms of the large numbers of murders and sacrifices. There are many crimes with a claim to be satanic practices, or for Satan, but may just derive from personal desires. For example, Richard Ramirez was a hardcore Satanist, drew pentagrams of himself, his victims, their homes, and claimed to kill for the pleasure of Satan. Richard actually developed his intense sexual desires at a young age, and at the same time became involved with the Church of Satan. This is just one of the serial killers that were influenced by Satanism. Offenders include Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer. Satanism isn't the only organization out there that performs sacrifices. There are many types of sacrificial rituals with many desired outcomes, like as a way to please the gods or as a community tradition. Although aren't spoken about in the media though, they still happen in our society. Yes, in the 21st century Western and Eastern society, there have been some tragic cases of human sacrifices. For example, in 2001 at the London Thames River near the Globe Theatre, a body of a mutilated little boy was found with no head, arms, or legs. It is believed that he originated from West Africa. Prior to his killing, he was starved and only given drugs and calabar beans, which are fed to a person to be killed in a sacrifice. Sadly, his killers were never found, and the boy was just called Adam. Additionally, cases of human sacrifices are more common in Eastern societies. In October 21st, 2011, 7-year-old Lalita was abducted from her neighbor's home in the remote village of Jawara in India. A week later, her mutilated body was found by her parents. At first, the police thought that it was a rape and murder case, but it was later found that she was sacrificed to ensure that the village's annual harvest went smoothly. Her throat was slashed and her liver taken out and offered to the gods. Something else that pointed to this being a sacrifice was that some money was found near the body. There was a similar case in India, where the chopped head of a 55-year-old man was found buried in a farmer's field, again, to ask the gods for rain and a good harvest. Moreover, there are some traditions we may look at as traditional ritual crimes in our society, but in the community they originate from, they are perfectly normal and sometimes legal. Public executions have been used as a method of punishment and humiliation to the offenders and their family for as long as time. But by the start of the 19th century in Europe, reformers began to and they began to make the executions a private affair. Since then, many countries have not only stopped carrying out public executions but also abolished the death penalty completely. In 2012, Amnesty International recorded 4 countries still carrying out public executions. These are Iran, North Korea, Saudi Arabia, and Somalia. And although they did not mention other countries like China or Syria, doesn't mean we should rule them out, as there have been reports of public executions happening there. Similarly, some societies lynch their offenders. Lynching is when the accused is killed by informal members of the public, in other words, by mobs of angry villagers. Happens in witch huntings. Data says that over the last 6 years, approximately 90 people, mostly women, have been killed either by being beheaded, stabbed, or being burnt alive by other villagers in India. Other methods include stoning, which is still legal in Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Yemen, Sudan, Iran, and some parts of Nigeria. All of these rituals have an underlying purpose. For example, some rituals may strengthen the community's collective consciousness. This is a terminology which was developed by Emile Durkheim in 1893. A collective consciousness is having a set of shared beliefs, ideas, and morals allows society to have social solidarity. This could be the case in rituals where an offender offers themselves as sacrifices. Then we have Freud, who argues that a ritual's purpose is to control anxiety and panic in the community, working as a catharsis, or in other words, as a purification of evil or danger. Moreover, in some communities, ritual murders are carried out to make muti, or other cures. They are called medicine murders, which is the act of acquiring body parts for medicine or magic concoctions in witchcraft. Most likely targets are albinos. This normally happens in the southern parts of Africa, although it is still illegal everywhere. Lastly, we have seen an increase in portrayals of ritualistic violence in the media, with some of them copying real-life crimes or criminals. For example, the movie Dahmer, based on serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer, or in some cases, movies inspiring a copycat crime. For example, movies like American Psycho.